All right, it's time now for Explain and Verify. Samgele Masego is standing by. Of course, Samgele, the biggest story of the day, Treasury abandoning the proposed VAT hike following the political disagreements. Take us through the latest developments.
Indeed, Bongiwe, that VAT hike has essentially been scrapped by the political formations that were negotiating inside the government of national unity and outside of the government of national unity. But we can also give credit to all other political formations, such as that of the Democratic Alliance and the Economic Freedom Fighters, went to the Western Cape High Court to try and essentially get this VAT increase declared null and void, and the adoption of that fiscal policy framework budget of the country that was adopted by the National Assembly, which they say is unconstitutional at this point in time, Bongiwe. So essentially, there will be no VAT increase. There was that proposal at first of 2% by the Minister of Finance, Indok Kotongwane, that was rejected by South African political parties and the members of cabinet. They ultimately went down and said it must be 0.5% year on year on this financial year and the next financial year. That was given a 30-day reprieve to go have political formations negotiate upon it, which saw Rise Mzansi, Bossa, and ultimately Action SA of Herman Mashaba leading the charge in negotiating with the African National Congress. And they have successfully gotten that particular 0.5% VAT increase removed as part of this current budget of the country.
And Samuel, of course, we are being told by Treasury that it's estimating that there's going to be a shortfall of around 75 billion rand.
Indeed, Bongiwe, there is that 75 billion rand shortfall that Treasury has essentially said is there within the budget of the country. You did know that that 0.5% VAT increase was going to cover about 13.5 billion rands of the shortfall on the national budget. But at this point in time, the Minister of Finance and SARS are going to work hand in hand in trying to find monies or revenue for that particular shortfall. The Secretary General of the ANC and other political formations such as Rise Mzansi leader Songezo Zibi, Herman Mashaba of Action SA, the IFP through Mkhuleko Hlengwa at that particular press briefing, even at the ANC's Northern Cape Provincial Conference where Fikile Mbalula was closing that particular conference, it did say that SARS is going to play a critical role and trying to get that extra revenue for South Africa, particularly meaning that a lot of money is going to be pumped into capacitating the South African revenue services in order to try and collect more money that will essentially try and close that budget deficit or shortfall of 75 billion rands that is there, which is one of the proposals that the Economic Freedom Fighters, that the Commissioner of SARS, Edward Kidswetter, you know that the Treasurer General of the EFF, Ompilo Moato, has been essentially saying that they, as the EFF, are supporting the SARS Commissioner Edward Kidswetter in capacitating SARS to go after that extra 800 or so billions of rands that may be at the disposal if SARS is capacitated in order to get it from those South Africans who are eligible to pay extra taxes but are currently not.
What happens now to the court action, Samgele?
It's going to be rather interesting what happens to this particular court action that has been instituted by the Democratic Alliance, which is part of the government of national unity, noting that the ANC was supposed to have a meeting with the Democratic Alliance today. That was cancelled in the late hours of last night by the ANC negotiators, putting precedence to the press briefing that currently took place of the over 50+1 political parties in Parliament, percentage-wise, that had that particular briefing in Sandton earlier today, led by the ANC, Rise Mzansi, Bossa, Patriotic Alliance, PA, and IFP, and other political formations that were there today. But interestingly, the Minister of Finance, that would be Enoch Madiba Kotongwane, has written a letter to the Democratic Alliance to seek an out-of-court settlement. The DA did say they're waiting for that particular letter to come to them, particularly noting that the withdrawal had not yet been gazetted by the Minister of Finance and Treasury. It has effectively now been gazetted on the withdrawal of the VAT increase and certain parts of the fiscal framework of the country that would include the budgetary aspect of this current particular budget. budget. It's going to be interesting how the DA responds to this particular matter, and that will ultimately seal their fate of whether they will continue being part of the government of national unity, or they are essentially walking away. As in the words of the ANC president and president of the country, the DA has defined itself outside of the government of national unity.
And quite interesting, Samgele, because when you think about, this particular picture, not only, people looking at the DA now, but as you mentioned earlier on, those political parties that were working with the African National Congress here, rejoicing, calling it a win for South Africans.
Indeed, Bongiwe, there's been a myriad of responses from political parties. I saw when I was watching clips of the Secretary General of the MK Party, Floyd Nkosivambu. He was claiming victory outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court, but they never went to court on this particular matter with the DA and the Economic Freedom Fighters. They're not part of the negotiations with the African National Congress. In fact, Floyd Nkosivambu even said to me when he was in Soweto in a rally of the MK Party that they're not getting involved in the domestic issues of the government of national unity, domestic issues of the DA and the African National Congress. So one wonders, on what virtue do they claim victory over this victory of removing the 0.5 VAT increase within the party? Well, Olen Sandre is claiming victory. Then you look at the slides that we currently have. The ANC, their own ministers, Dr. Khosientso Ramokgopa, not Sihlezi Galala, Dr. Khosientso Ramokgopa, Mamloko Kubai, they were part of the ministers in cabinet that were essentially against this VAT increase when it was tabled by the Minister of Finance in cabinet, Enoch Godongwane, alongside some DA members of the executive. The ANC saying, we welcome the statement of Treasury for the interest of South Africans. South Africans come first. This is one of the statements that they have essentially been saying over the past while. It goes directly to what the Freedom Charter, Bongiwe, says when it correctly states in the Freedom Charter that the people shall govern. Quote, the people shall govern. End of quote. Not that the ANC shall govern, but the people shall govern. And this particular negotiations over the budgetary and the fiscal framework of the country has proved that particular point of the Freedom Charter, that the people are indeed governing. When we've got a plethora of political parties either working together or others working together in another corner independently in court to try and overturn this particular VAT increase. Then you have the Democratic Alliance, which is also claiming victory. Quote, 2024 elections gave us the balance of power in Parliament as it enables us to take a strong stand to be your voice to stop the things that you don't want. End of quote. That's the DA there claiming this particular victory of this repealing of a VAT increase. Then the Inkatha Freedom Party, which has been very vocal that the DA has to choose whether they are in opposition or a government or a ruling or one of the parties in government. They've got to decide whether they're in opposition or they're in government. Khule Gohleng are saying that you can't be half pregnant. It's either you're pregnant or not pregnant. The IFP is saying anybody else who masquerades as the messiah of this moment outside this collective is misplaced, misguided in terms of what's actually happening. We've been hard at work. So essentially, MK Party, EFF, Democratic Alliance, you can't claim this victory according to the Inkatha Freedom Party. Then one may say, Mr. VAT Action, that is Action SA, Herman Mashaba. Their particular point was VAT increase is gone thanks to the collective of parties that engage the ANC in good faith. No one party can impose its will on others. So essentially it shows how a plethora of political formations within the country have worked together, particularly the smaller political parties that have shown clarity and maturity when it comes to this particular debate of the fiscal framework of the country. Just as a layman's person sitting at home who doesn't have a background in finance or budgetary aspects of the country, I found it very easier to listen to a Songezo Zibi in Parliament explaining that they were not adopting a budget of the country in Parliament. They were adopting the fiscal framework of the budget, and there are many other parts that they still have to adopt in order to adopt the national budget of the country, and that the fiscal framework of the budget was just the first step, which was one of the confusing points for many South Africans, whether the budget had actually been adopted or the fiscal framework of the budget. So kudos to the smaller political formations that it's not only your electoral numbers that count, but it is also the research capacity of your staff within the National Assembly on specific points, particularly whether it be monetary value or budgeting of the country. That also helps. That also includes how the Democratic Alliance and the economic freedom fighters, through their own researchers and legal brains and legal minds, have essentially gone to the High Court in the Western Cape to challenge this particular VAT increase and fiscal framework of the budget of the country, and how processes were not thoroughly followed in the standing committee that sat discussing this particular matter in the committees.
And it's going to be interesting, some get it to even hear from one smaller party, that is Rise Mzansi. They'll be in conversation with Tembegile in just a moment, just to give us a sense from their vantage point, how are they processing the developments of today. Thank you so much for wrapping that for us. That's Samgele Masego there on this week's edition of Explain and Verify.